So I was in the altar earlier this morning, and I asked the altar boys, I said, I have a joke for you. How many priests does it take to put in a light bulb? And one of the altar boys said very wisely, none, because the altar boys do it. Which is exactly what I was thinking, but somebody nailed it, so he can go home and tell his mom he deserves the day off. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. I wanted to tell you today a story about a particular person named Valentine Filoxovich Vino Yashensky. It's a common name. You've probably heard about him before. He was born on April 14th in 1877 in East Crimea. He was taught about orthodoxy by his pious father, and he began to become inspired after he had received a New Testament at his high school graduation. He had a brilliant secular mind. He graduated the Kiev Academy of Fine Arts to be an artist, but then he realized he wanted to help people. And he went back to school at the age of 26 to become a physician. And he graduated from the Great Prince St. Vladimir Medical School at the University of Kiev. And he was well known, for having an exceptional understanding of the human anatomy. He became the head surgeon and a professor of surgery at the hospital in Tashkent. He developed the use of regional anesthesia and became well known for curing ophthalmologic and surgical cases that other doctors were unable to cure. He wrote several articles on pyogenic infections, which is about local inflammation and infection. And these articles were recognized, and he was awarded the doctorate degree of medical science. His writings on these infections are used in modern-day medicine today, and has laid the foundation for this medical specialty that we have today. He was married. He was married to his wife named Anna, and she was a nurse, and that's how he got to know her, and they had 4 children. Unfortunately, she died from tuberculosis. Now, before I go on any further, I wanted to tell you about the person whom I'm speaking. And unfortunately, I did not print out the picture that I was looking for. There's one more piece of paper that eludes me. This is where the tape comes in. Here is a picture of him. It's a difficult picture to see, but here he is right here with the red circle around his head, doing a surgery in one of the hospital rooms that he was assigned to in his hospital. But what I wanted to tell you was, before we go on talking about his surgical and why are we talking about this Valentine person, is because we have a very special gift in our church now that comes from this Valentine, who became Father Valentine, who became Archbishop Luke of Crimea, who became St. Luke the Surgeon. And St. Luke the Surgeon, we have his icon right here now. This is whom I'm talking about, right here. This is St. Luke the Surgeon, whose name was Valentine, and we have a piece of his clothing enshrined in the bottom of the icon. So before we go on any further and you wonder where I'm going with this, I wanted to let you know that his name was Valentine, and his name was Father Valentine until the point when he became a bishop, and his name was changed to Archbishop Luke. Now, why Luke? Because Luke, the apostle and evangelist, was a physician, and he changed his name to that after he was ordained. But St. Luke's schedule, after his wife died, became very difficult, and his children had received from God a surrogate mother named Sophia Sergievna, who took the duties of raising his children. And St. Luke did not remarry, nor did he have any relationship, as our minds might wander, with this Sophia, but he rather had his children entrusted to her care because he was all over the place. And one of the other things that had happened to him after he was made an archbishop, here's a picture of him here. That's what he looks like. One of the things that happened in that time period, as we know under the communist era, was that anyone who was a Christian was being imprisoned. So St. Luke spent 16 years of his life imprisoned in 3 different periods. In 1921, was at the age of 44, was when he was ordained. And only 2 years after he was ordained, he was arrested. And he, like I said, he was exiled and imprisoned 3 times during his life for a total of about 16 years. In 1937 was one of the more difficult arrests where he was tortured. And his torture is noted in the story of his life. And he would go back to his cell and he would write his memoirs, which are very interesting. They're not memoirs of a person saying, well, I'm so good, or that, you know, like sometimes we might envision a saint writing about how great his life is. He was very stern and very supportive to the other prisoners who were there, and he said, they demand that I remove my rasa, which is my robe. I will never do so. It's my robe. It will be the very death of me. I help people as a physician, and I also help them as a servant of the church. So in 1942, he was released, and he became the archbishop, like I said. In 1944, he became the Archbishop of Simferopol and Crimea, which is his title as St. Luke, Archbishop of Simferopol and Crimea. In 1946, 2 years after he became the archbishop, he was noted for his scholarly work, and he was given the Stalin Award, which is very confusing when you think about it. First, he was in prison for being a Christian, and then he's released and he's given an award, the Stalin Award, for his scientific publications. Now, he died on June 11th, 1961, and when a saint dies, that is the feast day of the saint. So his feast day is on June 11th. And when he died in 1961, I mean, this is very recent when you think about it, the government tried to keep his funeral quiet because they knew he was a holy man. And one of the things that helped him to navigate through the imprisonments was the fact that he was a doctor like no other in the area. He was taking on cases and healing patients by his procedures and by his prayers that no one else could take, no one else could heal. And even the charges against him for imprisonment were ridiculous charges, but one of them was he was not medically attending to the soldiers well enough and not doing his duty well enough to them, where they brought charges against him and said he was a false doctor. But we see that at his funeral, they knew, and Christianity still was squelched in the area, and they tried to herd the funeral on buses and tried to move them through. And what had happened is so many people revered him and loved him, were healed by him, and realized his life, that they were from the rooftops and on the streets, and his funeral became a giantly attended funeral, and a funeral of prayer and of peace, instead of just a rush through to squelch this particular saint. Now, in 1995, which is not too long ago either, he was proclaimed a saint by the Ukrainian church, and in 1996, he was proclaimed a saint by the Russian Orthodox Church. So I bring this up to you today because we received this relic of his clothing that I had been speaking about the past few weeks, waiting for the icon to be made. And thank you for all of your donations that one Sunday where we collected, because we had enough, just enough, which is always the way it works. It wasn't an extraordinary amount over, and it wasn't under. It was just the right amount that we collected on the Sunday tray to pay for the icon. So you all contributed to the donation of this icon. And the relic of his clothing is an aqua-colored vestment that is in there. And also, I have a small piece of that inside my reliquary cross where I have the relics of St. Athanasius and also part of the tomb of St. John, so of San Francisco, so that when you are coming for a procedure or a surgery and you come forward to have the prayer blessed, we are going to do the prayer. Now we move the icon right there so that we can stand in front of that icon and say the prayer before surgery. And then if you're visited in the hospital, if you ask for a visit and are visited in the hospital, that always I will have part of his clothing with me to bless you with in the hospital setting as well. So this is a great and another great gift we have for our church. And I wanted to bring his life forward to you because it's not only in pictures, but there also is, if you go on YouTube, there's also some short video of him actually moving, like video footage of him. One is he's walking to a building, and this cat comes down, and he's got all his, he's dressed in the black with his hat and his black robes, and he just bends down and starts petting this cat. Just very short video, no audio or anything like that. And then the other short clip is him walking up a staircase. And those are the only two clips that I know that I've discovered of him where you can actually see a saint on video. We know that now with St. Porphyrios and St. Paisios, the newer saints in our church, that there's audio of them and there's color pictures of them. And I'm sure it's sometimes video too, but I think St. Paisios specifically was one of those saints who did not like himself being audio or video recorded. And in fact, one of the stories of one of the pilgrims who went there, he said, "Can I audio tape what you're going to talk about?" And he said, "No." He says, "Let's just talk." So the man anyways hit the recorder in his pocket and recorded the conversation with himself and St. Paisios. And he went back and he said, I taped Elder Paisios at the time, and I have him on tape, our conversation. So everybody's, "Oh, this is great. We're going to hear St. Paisios, Elder Paisios on tape." So he goes back and he rewinds the tape, he plays it, and what does he hear? He hears all the background noise, but no dialogue with him and St. Paisios. He can hear the birds chirping, he can hear the wind blowing, but there's no dialogue whatsoever on that videotape or the audio tape. Anyways, coming back to St. Luke, we see that St. Luke is a modern-day saint. He is a saint that should be our patron saint, one of the ones we look to when we have surgeries, not only for eyes, but also heart surgery as well. He was considered to be a specialist in both of those areas, eyes and hearts. And when he died, like I had mentioned before, his relics were exhumed, and the only two things, as they took his relics out, his bones were there, and every part of him had decayed and had gone, but the two parts, if you will, of his body that were intact were his heart and his eyes. So those were actually remained intact in his relics. So if you ever see relics of the flesh of St. Luke, it either comes from his heart or from his eyes. And last year, when I went to Greece last year, I went into a church, and it's always, as I go into, there's so many churches in Greece, but I went into one church, and the priest I was with was talking with the priest there. So obviously, I'm looking at the altar cloths and checking out all the stuff in the altar, and I see in the back there's this icon, and it's about this big, and I see it's St. Luke, and I see a relic in there, and I said to the priest, I said, where did you get this? What is it? And he says, "We just got this icon with his relic, and that's a piece of his heart." So it is a very unique thing. But now we have a piece of his vestments, and as you know, with the priesthood, that when the priest puts his stole over the person, that's the prayer that's read. So when we now will say the prayers before surgery in front of the icon, that you will be underneath the stole, if you will, of St. Luke, as well as under the prayers of the church. So it's a beautiful blessing for us, and I pray that you, as you come up today this is like our Hall of Fame. It's like a wall of fame. It kind of goes around, and I look forward to having more as the years go on for us. But as you come up today to be dismissed for Andidron at the end of the service, come up and take a look at the relic. You can venerate the relic. You can also venerate the icon. It's okay to touch it. It's not going to fall out. It's not going to go anywhere. So take a good look and realize that this great saint that we have, this surgeon, the patron saint for us in many ways, will be now here in our church in a very special way to be with us and bless us. Amen.